Hey there, in today's video, I want to talk a bit about League mechanics on the Steam Deck and which ones are a good fit for playing on the Steam Deck and which ones you really ought to avoid. The reason I'm making this video is because there's a new League coming up and you're going to have to figure out what your ally strategy is going to be, which League mechanics you're going to farm, which ones you're going to block, etc. And when it comes to the Steam Deck, not all League mechanics are created equal. Some mechanics, which work totally fine on a PC with a keyboard and mouse, end up playing absolutely miserably on the Steam Deck, either because of the controller controls or just because of performance reasons. So in this video, I want to go through all of them, and I wanted to give you a general sense of which mechanics work totally fine and which ones don't. In fact, there's even a few League mechanics which, in my opinion, work much better with a controller than they do with a keyboard and mouse. So when you're playing on the Steam Deck, these League mechanics are absolutely the ones to go for. Before we get into it though, if this is the sort of content that you enjoy, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. This is a brand new channel trying to get things off to the ground, and every single subscriber really helps out. Now, something I want to point out is that this tier list is based purely on how good it feels to do these mechanics on the Steam Deck with the controller. It has nothing to do with how profitable they are, how good they're going to be in 3.19, anything like that. This is just how good are these mechanics, specifically doing them on a Steam Deck. So let's start talking about these League mechanics. First up is the League mechanic which gains the most on the Steam Deck, which is Essence. This is the first and perhaps only one going in the better than PC category. The reason for this is the Remnants of Corruption. On PC, you have to open up your inventory, right-click, and then click on the Essence to apply one of these. With a controller, however, there is a permanent key binding to the Y button. All you have to do is walk up to an Essence and hit Y on the controller, and it will use a Remnant of Corruption right out of your inventory. Oh my god, this feels so good. It makes farming Essences absolutely amazing. Not only that, but with the dedicated loot button with the controller controls, once you kill the Essence mob, you just mash A 5 or 6 times, pick up all those Essences, and zoom right along. If you're planning to play a lot on the Steam Deck, you should absolutely go for Essences. Similarly, strongboxes work just fine on the Steam Deck. You run up to them, you hit A, you kill some stuff, you get some loot, works great. Shrines, on the other hand, you might think would go here, but actually they're a bit less than ideal. And the reason for that is that with the controller controls, when you hit the A button, it tries to figure out what you're trying to select, and if there's enemies nearby, it often won't select an interactable like a shrine on the first try. Because shrines are surrounded by enemies, oftentimes I find myself having to run in circles for like a second mashing A before to actually register the shrine, which doesn't feel great. But other than that, I mean, they still put monsters in your maps. You hit A, you zoom along. It's not a huge problem, but it is not ideal. For Abyss, totally fine. You run up, you kill the monsters, you hit A on the chest, get the loot, and move on. Nothing wrong there. Incursion is actually totally fine as well. You just hit A, and then what you do is you hit the right bumper in order to open up the portal. You go in, and it's totally fine. Incursions work great. Bestiary is another story. Bestiary is going in the don't tier. And the reason for this might seem a bit odd, because if you're just running through the maps, Bestiary is not a problem at all. The problem is you either have to capture the beasts up in orbs or use the crafts yourself. And doing those on a controller is not great. Now, if you plan to just farm this on your Steam Deck and then actually sell them and get the stuff together on your PC, then it's totally fine. However, the UI stuff is kind of a nightmare on the Steam Deck, so I'm going to put it in the don't tier, but this one's kind of personal preference. If you're only playing on the Steam Deck a little bit, this one's totally fine to just kill some beasts while you're doing your maps on your Steam Deck and then cash them in on your PC. But otherwise, if you're playing a lot in the Steam Deck, I would just pass on Bestiary. Breach is another that's totally fine. You just open it up, you kill the monsters. In fact, this is borderline better than PC just because I find Breach Splinters are kind of a pain to click on PC, but you're just mashing the A button a bunch. They're kind of totally fine to pick up. Normally I hide Breach Splinters, but when I'm playing with a controller, I actually totally fine with showing them on my loot filter. Harbinger, same thing. You run across them, you kill them, you get your loot, no problem. Metamorph is going into the not ideal category though, just because anything where you have to open up the UI and select options and stuff, no matter how they try to streamline it for a controller, it ends up feeling a bit less than ideal. Navigating UI like that with a controller is just slower than a keyboard and mouse, and it ends up feeling kind of bad. But for the most part, you can run Metamorphs and kill them, and it's not a huge imposition. It feels kind of bad when you're selecting the organs, because on a PC, you can hover the mouse over real quick for the ones that share icons, but on a controller, you have to like toggle through them or just pick whatever organs and not care. So it's not ideal, but I mean, you can still totally do it. Blight, though, oh my god. Blight is a big don't. Absolutely don't Blight. So picking your towers of the PC and mouse can be kind of less than ideal at sometimes, but doing it with the controller, it feels awful. Not only is it worse than a PC and mouse, but I swear to God, there's that bug where sometimes you select a tower and it just won't register and you click it over and over. I feel like I get that so much more frequently with the controller. It happens almost all the time where it just won't let me select towers. I don't know what's up with this. Maybe this is just me, but I've had so many nightmares with Blight trying to do it with the controller and on the Steam Deck that I'm just going to give this one a hard pass. Heist is a bit iffy because it's almost in the better than PC category, because all the interactables you can just do with A. The doors, having your rogues go to unlock things and open chests for you. You just run up to them and hit A, which to me ends up feeling a lot better than hitting the league button, especially because you hit A to have them open the door or whatever, and then loot pops out of a chest and you just hit A again to loot it. It ends up feeling really good. Unfortunately, it's going to go in the not ideal category because outside of actually doing a heist, there's so many UI things associated with heist. When you finish a contract, you then have to vendor the item to get your rogue markers back. You have to grab the contract, you have to roll the contracts, you have to put it in, you have to select the rogue that's coming along with you. If you're doing a blueprint, you have to do the reveals, you have to select this whole cadre of, rogues to come along with you. And with a controller, all that stuff just feels worse and slower. You can still do it, and sort of like maps, you can pre-roll the contracts on PC and then just run them on your Steam Deck. If you really want to go all in on Heist, you can totally do it, but I wouldn't super recommend it. Ritual is another that's just totally fine. You go up, you kill the monsters. The UI at the end, you're just grabbing a couple things anyway, so it doesn't really matter doing it with a controller. It doesn't feel a lot worse, so it's fine. Then Rogue Exiles. I mean, I don't really know why you would try to farm Rogue Exiles as a mechanic, but if you wanted to, you run them over, they die, I guess you get loot. You can. There's nothing against it, right? Betrayal. This is another not ideal. Once again, anything that requires a lot of use of the UI is bad, and not only is it every time you kill one of these guys, you have to bring up the UI, but then when you have the safe house open, a lot of the things you get are crafting rewards you have to use benches for. Those also require the UI. You have to go back to your hideout. You have to go to your stash. Going through your stash is slower with a controller. It ends up just feeling a lot worse. But it's not so bad that I would say that you really shouldn't do it. You can do it, but it's not ideal. So Beyond is kind of a mystery. Right now, I would say it's not ideal because simply for performance reasons. However, we don't really know what Beyond is going to look like in 3.19. It's been completely revamped. Perhaps the performance issues will be not nearly as bad as they have been in the past, in which case this might be totally fine. However, lower-end PCs like the Steam Deck tend to struggle when a lot of monsters are spawning in at the same time, which is what Beyond is all about. So I'm going to leave it at not ideal for now. However, when I revisit performance in 3.19 in a video in the future, I might revise this. It might turn out that it's totally fine. Finally, we have Expedition. I'm going to put this in not ideal. I've done a lot of Expedition on my Steam Deck, even in spite of putting it in not ideal, just because it can be so profitable. But as for the actual experience of doing it on the Steam Deck, it just feels clunky. First of all, when you're running around the map and you see the remnants as you're running into the Expedition, I don't know what it is, but I have a lot of trouble actually reading the modifiers while I'm moving. It might be like a refresh rate, maybe like the frame rate's too low, or it might be like a bit of blurriness in the screen. But I have to actually stop moving in order to read the modifiers, which first of all slows things down because you run in, you have to stop in 1/3, read some of the remnants, you have to move, stop, read the remnants, move, stop, read the remnants. Okay, now you know what all the remnants are. You have to go to the first one, Then you have to open up the UI, which is a bit clunky, and whereas on PC, you just go click, 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 plunger, set it off. You have to sort of like adjust the circle with your stick, and it feels a bit clunky and a bit slow. It's not terrible. You can do it, but it doesn't feel good the way it can on a PC if you get really fast and really good at Expedition. Delve feels great. You just go in, you select a node, you run, you're just holding the left stick down, everything's dying as you run along. It just feels great. I recommend Delve. I've done a whole bunch of it with the controller in on the Steam Deck, and it always felt great to me. Next we have Harvest. So in 3.18, Harvest was absolutely the worst. Like, I'd almost put a tier below Don't for just for Harvest, because doing the crafts and having to have all these items in your stash that you're going through one at a time and going through and doing that on a controller is actually impossible. You just couldn't do it. Having said that, in 3.19 with the rework, I think this is going to be totally fine. You just run in, you hit the button on one of the two, and then you pick up a single stack of loot. I mean, it's going to be great, I think. So in 3.19, Harvest, going to be totally fine, calling it now. Delirium, I'm going to say, is not ideal for performance reasons. Mechanically, there's nothing wrong with it, obviously, but when you're slowing things down, things becomes tanky, when there's all the more monsters on screen, when you have all these effects going off, it can hurt performance a little bit. Not a ton, as if you saw my recent performance video, you would know, but enough that it's something you might want to avoid, at least doing in large quantities or having as your main farm. And then Legion. Legion, you would think would go in totally fine. However, I'm going to knock it down to not ideal. And the reason for that is that I find, at least on the maps I do a lot of promenades. So when I spawn a Legion, it tends to come across multiple levels, or might spawn across gaps or around corners if you're in an interior area through a door. And on PC, it's totally fine to get over a gap or get through those areas in order to get to the whole Legion quickly. But with a controller, that can feel a bit awkward. A lot of times when I do Legion on a map like Promenade, I'll hit my movement skill, like my Flame Dash or something. And then even if I'm holding the correct direction, sometimes it just won't blink over the gap or blink down or up the area I'm trying to. And I'm just kind of stuck, and time is ticking away on my Legion, and it ends up feeling not great. Depending on the maps you're running, Legion could be totally fine, but I'm going to put it not ideal just because you kind of have to look out for the map you're running and the movement skill you're using and whether or not you'll have problems. And sometimes you will just miss out on killing mobs because of that, and it feels really bad. But once again, everything in the not ideal category you can do if you want. It's just you have to be aware it'll be a bit suboptimal. This is how I'd rate all the leagues currently on the Steam Deck. This also goes for controller play as well. So this is something to consider if you either have a Steam Deck or are planning to get one sometime during Calandra League. Supplies available. I think a lot of people are going to be getting those Steam Decks. This is something you can keep in mind as to what Atlas mechanics you should spec into farming if you're planning to play across both the PC and the Steam Deck. Hopefully this helped. If it did, you should go ahead and leave a subscribe. Also, I have found all of your comments very helpful as far as what videos I should focus on, what do you want to see in the future. So if you have any comments, ideas, things you want to see from me, leave a comment. I really appreciate them. And thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it helped, and I'll see you in the next one.